Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Melbourne AWS User Group podcast. We're now in 2021, so this is our first episode of the new year. And again, we'll be discussing everything that was new in January, or rather since our last episode, which was recorded halfway through reInvent. Once again, I'm joined by my good friends, Guy Morton.
Hello.
And Jean-Manuel Becker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to us.
Cool. So it's been busy. We've had some things come out from reInvent that we didn't cover in our last episode, and then some more things afterwards. So let's just dive into it and discuss what there is. As always, let's start with finally in Sydney. We've got 4 announcements this time.
Start with the most boring one, Arjen, and then we'll build up.
Okay.
Now we have to decide which is the most boring one.
I'll go for recognition custom labels.
Yeah, I think that's a solid choice.
So this means that you can now use custom labels for your recognition. This is for automatically labeling and things like that. And I believe, JM, you mentioned earlier that it's not the full version of it available in Sydney?
Well, it's about the rate you can process the information. So, for example, Tokyo, you can do 5 transactions per second. US East, you can do 50 operations per second. In Sydney, it's 2 for certain operations per second. So, I'm not sure the impact it would have. But per account, we are much more limited than other regions at the moment in capacities.
But is that about the rate at which the custom labels can be used, or the rate at which you can create them?
It's the rate you can send the AutoML to create the tags and compare faces, detect faces, get celebrity info, index faces. It's the transaction per second at the account for the image data plane operation.
Right. So I guess we just don't have all the gear.
Oh, that might be sufficient. I mean, 2 or 3 or 1 operation per second, that might be enough to do the job. But obviously, the US East has 50, and even Tokyo have 5 now. I'm sure they're going to build up. It's about building the capacity here in AP Southeast too.
Yeah.
So I'll remind everyone Recognition custom library is automated machine learning to find objects in scene and images. So you can find logo, you can find on media post, for example, you can find product on shelf, you can classify machine parts in assembly line. So it's really for factories and for recognizing object into images at the fast rate.
Cool. So, second most boring, Particle QL?
Yep, I think so.
So Particle QL for DynamoDB is now in Sydney, and 23 regions now in total. So that's the SQL-like query language that you can now use. If you've got a DynamoDB database set up, you can use Particle QL to query it instead of the DynamoDB API calls and such.
So yeah, particularql.org, that's a website. You can go and download the open source product there. You need the Java runtime to be able to run it on your machine. You can query language with SQL compatible language queries and access multiple type of data stores. So not only DynamoDB, but all the type of data, even, CSV files and everything semi-structured or nested data you can query with SQL language. So that was open source by AWS because they were using that in-house. So now you can enjoy it for yourself.
Yeah, they released the language itself sometime earliest last year, I think. But yeah, now having it available for Dynamo is really nice. And I believe the intention was to make it a single language available for all the services. Yeah,
that makes sense. And you're both very literate because you pronounce the right way, particle. You could pronounce it partiQL or some other part, but the way to pronounce it correctly is particle. Yes, that's correct.
And it seems like AWS is really positioning that as a sort of a common lingua franca for databases in their ecosystem. So they're kind of bringing it in to play in all different places.
Yeah. So a bit of competition between the most interesting one. Is it T4G in Sydney, or is it network firewall?
Well, you could probably start a bar fight about that.
Yeah, I think for most people, it would be the T4G that is the most interesting. But I think with us, it's probably the network firewall. So let's just first quickly go over T4G. There's not that much to say about it. Obviously, we've discussed these already many times before. Successors basically to T3 instances. The T4G are the Graviton instances. They run the same way as the T3 instances, so you've got limited spike loads.
Yeah, you have the ability to burst CPU usage at any time as long as you're required. So it works the same, a baseline level CPU, and you burst it when you need it. The big difference though is not Intel, obviously. It's ARM, it's the custom built by AWS processor, 64-bit ARM Neoverse N1 cores. But what AWS says is like, it's 40% faster than the T3 instances. So you can get so much more bang for your buck, basically, with that performance. And it comes in 7 size, and up to 8 vCPU and 32 gig memory. And all come with 5 gig bandwidth on the network. And that was a big problem on T2 and T3, where the bandwidth was really bad. So this one guarantee 5 gig, and then all EBS optimized as well. So you have a decent machine, even in the T family, to play around with.
Yeah. And also until the end of March, you can use 750 hours of free T4G micro usage per month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a 2 CPU, 1 gig memory machine. And if you use the 8 CPU version, you will get credited still the 2 CPU and 1 gig memory cost. So that's nice enough, even if you use a bigger one. And I'll remind everyone that you can have, many Linux distro running on this, like Amazon Linux, Ubuntu, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, Fedora, Debian. I mean, the list goes on. You can even run ECR, ECS, EKS, and you have all the agents that AWS provide, like CloudWatch, System Manager, Inspector, CrowdStrike, Datadog. I mean, keep going on the list. So it's really a viable product now, and I think companies should look at it. 40% more performance and cheaper price. You can't beat that.
Yeah, and it's also greener, right? It's using less power. That's part of the story there too.
Yes. Amazon want to reach, I think, green. 100% renewable energy in this decade, so that's going to help them for sure.
Cool. So, and as we've already hinted at, the final one for now available in Sydney is the network firewall, released originally, I think it was the week before reInvent, or maybe 2 weeks before. This allows you to set up a managed firewall in your account, including letting traffic go through a transit gateway and then outbound through the network firewall, so that you can just have the one for all of your VPCs. And in general, it just seems like a really nice product.
Yes, it's we have been longing and waiting for a long time for a product like this in the AWS space. The nice part is it's a managed infrastructure with high availability. It's guaranteed for 4 nines, so that's pretty nice for a firewall. And knowing that you have several ones, so you can redirect traffic. You can obviously filter TCP rules, UDP rules quite easily. But you can do as well a traffic inspection with the SNI certificate with encrypted traffic, and you can use Suricata compatible rules, so you can import them from other places, which is the way to define what you want to filter. It has an IPS system included, inspecting the traffic flow, and then obviously you got some good logs as well. You can send to S3 and back to a SIEM or a SOC, further inspection on the logs. And because they include it can integrate with Firewall Manager. So if you have several network firewall inside your organization, you can ensure that they all have the same rules. You can talk about price a little bit. It's a bit dear when you look at the product in isolation. It's 39 cents, 0.5 per hour. Per endpoint. So when you have 3 AZs, you will need 3 endpoints. That's around $366 Australian per AZ and $1,200 per month for the 3 AZ. So when you annualize that, it's around $15,000 Australian dollars to have a firewall in your organization. So I recommend that you use an egress VPC, or you centralize your firewall and you use Transit Gateway to be able to centralize that traffic. If you don't want to use Transit Gateway, then you will need to install a firewall in almost all of your VPC, which will rocket up the cost. So AWS is nice enough. It gives you the free NAT service if you use the firewall, because usually they work in pairs. So you put your firewall and then your NAT. Or you can put your NAT and your firewall, depending on how the way you design it, in your traffic path. But if you are to compare with other marketplace products that a big FSI company are using, then we're talking about more like $45,000 a year. So when you compare the two products, and obviously they are not the same licensing, but AWS can offer a very decent firewall that you can tune and operate for a third of the cost of other offering in the marketplace, even with reserve instance and all of that. Because I'll remind you that if you use a marketplace product, you need to pay not only the license to the firewall provider, but as well the compute fee. In the network firewall product, everything is inclusive. I think it's a good offering.
I think that was our longest finally in Sydney section ever. So let's have a look at serverless now. There's a bunch of things for Lambda, but I suspect the most interesting one for most people will be the compute optimizer, that it now supports Lambda. Basically what this does is it analyzes your Lambda functions. For these, they have to have run a number of times, and based on that, it will then tell you, hey, scale it up or you can scale it down to get the most bang for your buck, basically.
So yeah, you need to run or to have invoked your Lambda function at least 50 times in the last 14 days for the optimizer to be able to have enough data to be able to have that information. So yeah, a bit the same as EC2, right? EC2, you had to have some minimum time as well.
I guess that makes sense.
But the size of compute and memory is always a big guess when you run your Lambda for the first time. So that's going to help us for sure at scale.
Even if you optimize it at the start, when you first deploy it, afterwards a function may get updated, it may get some improvements built into it, or it gets functionality added to it and in the end, then you'd be better off with different settings. But because nobody ever looks at it until the Lambda function fails, you won't know about that.
It's true.
Other than that,
Lambda got some updates around Apache Kafka, and Amazon MSK managed service for Kafka, which if you're using Kafka, you might be quite happy about. You can now have a self-managed Kafka as well, be an event source for Lambda, which is kind of neat.
So yeah, your batch get processed in 10,000 records. So Kafka is a streaming system of events, and Lambda obviously will wait for having the 10,000 record before it get launched, or if the payload reach 6 meg, and then your Lambda will operate and then do in batch your Kafka service, and obviously can scale if you have more and more. So very interesting. There is some announcement this month as well about SQS be able to handle faster processing, and it's in the same type of angle to be able to process, logs, transaction per second, and all of that much faster now through systems.
Is that specifically around the FIFO?
There is a FIFO, and there is the number of operation per second as well. I think it's moved from 2,000 per second to 5,000 per second now in the standard SQS. And you have a different pricing range. So, some operation in banking, for example, or transaction who couldn't use SQS had to go to Kafka. Maybe now they can reconsider SQS, I don't know. And then Lambda can process them and, update database as well in a kind of pub/sub type of environment. So yeah, a lot of improvement in that area, I can see. In the same, there is an announcement this month as well. AWS Lambda launching checkpointing for Amazon Kinesis and Dynamo Stream. So it's the same type of idea. If your Lambda function was failing, then you have to handle the errors and all of that. Now you can have checkpointing, so you can come back and in time on your Kinesis stream and then reprocess, avoiding duplication of record and error handling. So I think that's something angle maybe for the financial industry or stock market or banking, where they can use different options that before it was Kafka. Everybody wanted Kafka. Now there is, I think, more offering and more quality in the streaming product of AWS.
Well, I'm sure the stock market would love to roll back a couple of days at this point. I'd say the other major thing on the serverless side is API gateway, HTTP APIs now supporting data mapping. This again is one of those trends we've talked about before, where HTTP API and REST API are converging in their capabilities. And in this case, it is the data mapping.
Yeah, just adding all those useful features that weren't core enough to make it in the first version.
Mm-hmm.
Time for you to sleep, Guy, or?
No, time for me to learn. I'm going to listen to your words of wisdom. Yeah. So I do recognise some names of things in this section. So
Well, you can catch up. The IoT is all yours, Guy. Section.
Yeah, don't do that. I looked at it today. I thought, there's so many announcements. They're all so small. There's nothing nothing of great. Well, yeah, okay. Apart from LoRaWAN support, that was kind of nice. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk containers.
So there were some monitoring-based announcements there. First is a managed service for Prometheus. If you're not familiar with it, Prometheus is a monitoring tool. It's usually used in Kubernetes clusters, where it looks at the traffic, it looks at how your containers are running. It basically collects all the data for your infrastructure, and in most cases, it will then send it to something like Grafana, which coincidentally, at the same time, also became a managed service by Amazon.
The thing that I would observe about this is that they've announced 2 managed services for 2 extremely popular open source projects in this particular podcast that we're going to cover. And it was very interesting, I thought, reading the kind of announcements from Grafana, talking about how thrilled they were to have AWS helping basically spread the Grafana goodness to the world. And I think we'll just contrast that with a different managed service that we'll probably touch on soon. But it was interesting, I think, to see both Prometheus and Grafana join the AWS managed services stable. So kind of coincidentally with those other bits of news.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of open source tooling get turned into managed services for AWS. And yes, the one that you've been clearly hinting at, aka Elastic, that's definitely one. But also one that was very much in the news when that happened is like MongoDB, which was the first one to change the service, change their license to exclude cloud providers.
Mm.
So it's as you say, it's good to see that this at least seems to have gone very positively. At least that's what everybody's saying. I guess we'll find out in a year or two whether or not any more licenses are changed, or if Prometheus and Grafana are actually happy with this.
Yeah. So to come back to the product, this is a product in preview, only in certain regions. You can use it as well in preview with EKS and ECS. And we're talking about, managed services, and AWS is offering EKS, obviously for containers. And then usually you need to have all these products to be able to do proper monitoring on your EKS cluster. So it makes sense that they're offering the extension of the different product as a managed services as well. So it's called IMP and IMG. And yeah, I'm looking forward to use them. They're apparently 100% compatible with Prometheus. You can use the same PromQL queries. You can use the Prometheus exporters, and it run across multiple availability zones. So it's, highly available. Why building your own stuff when you can have the same product managed by AWS?
Yep.
But another question there would be, so why have 2 time series databases in AWS too? I mean, I know Prometheus is more than a time series database, but it's kind of at its core, that's what it is, right?
Yes, but it is slightly different. And as AWS likes to offer all the options you might be interested in.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really the push for EKS and, having EKS anywhere coming up and all that. I mean, we can't deny the presence of Kubernetes inside the AWS cloud. So
we can try.
Yeah, well, I don't especially like it, but it's there and people are using it. Painfully, I must say. So what about making the life easier of people who really want to use it by putting all the different products around it as a managed services? And
Sure. Look, I totally get it. I think it makes perfect sense. And obviously, you've got people wanting to move their Kubernetes clusters to AWS. They're going to say, well, yeah, but what about my Prometheus?
Exactly. Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. But I just think it's interesting. It's something we've talked about heaps of times around, AWS having more than one product that does something very similar.
Yeah.
And then over time, you sort of, they don't ever sort of really retire anything, obviously, but you sort of wonder whether there's a sort of I think the other example of that is probably the managed Cassandra service and DynamoDB. Again, you've got two things which are different, but they're often used to solve the same sorts of problems.
Yeah.
So you've got two choices now, and you sort of wonder whether you wonder. It'd be interesting to know how many people who are currently on Dynamo in AWS go, oh, now I can have managed Cassandra, beauty, and the same thing with TimeStream. People kind of going, oh, actually, I really wanted Prometheus. I mean, I don't know what the sort of decision matrix would be like on choosing between those things, and I'm just seeing that they're both TimeStream and thinking, well, they must be similar, but I'm sure there's lots of differences as well.
Well, AWS like to offer choice, and the only announcement this month was CloudWatch adds Fluent Bit support for container logs and EKS and Kubernetes. So now, if you click in the console, you can have the Fluent Bit logs sent to CloudWatch and then monitor them through CloudWatch. So that's, again, offering people choice and not having to do a specific, hard, this is the way we use the cloud and that's it. I think I like that approach.
Yep.
Yeah, another interesting announcement there was the EC2 image builder now supporting container images as well. I kind of feel like that makes the product name a bit of a misnomer now.
Well, container image is still a container image, right? It's still the same.
It's not an EC2 image.
It's not an EC2. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So yeah, you can build securely up-to-date Windows and Linux containers. So it's just not only for Linux. Yeah.
Yep. And I haven't tried this out yet. I don't know how good or bad it is. I've had issues just with image builder and generally just went back to Packer instead of using it.
Yeah, this is what we had to do as well for a couple of customers. That Packer is kind of a safe bet. But there is new functionality who comes with this image builder. You can distribute in different ECRs across multiple accounts. So there is some advantage there. Maybe use that product, can simplify it. And then you have some traceability as well with InfoSec policies about the template, and it's recorded so you know how it's been built and what's in the image exactly. So some advantage, pros and cons to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't done any work. I don't know, but does this actually still use Docker files? Because if it doesn't, then it would mean everybody needs to rewrite everything to actually be able to use this. And I don't see that happening because Docker files are quite convenient to build and test locally.
Yeah.
Let's just have a look on EC2 and VPC. More new Graviton instances.
Yay.
Yay, indeed. This time it's the 6CGN instance types, which basically means that these are the same C6Gs that we're already familiar with, but now with 100 gigabit per second networking, which is nice if you need that, but I suspect most of you listening don't actually have that requirement.
No, it's more for using the Elastic Fiber adapter, the EFA, and to do workload with HPC, video processing, and take advantage of lower latency for this type of clusters. So 100 gig network bandwidth, yes, but there's as well 38 gig of elastic block EBS bandwidth. So that really helped the access to the disk. And then they come in 8 size from 1 CPU to 64 vCPUs. But at the moment, they are available in US, Virginia, Ohio, US West, Oregon, and Europe, Ireland only.
The other announcement on the instance side is in autoscaling. If you use mixed instances policies for your autoscaling group, which is where you can define multiple different instance types for the same autoscaling group. And this is, for example, very useful if you want to use spot instances but have it automatically fall back to regular instances if they're available. You can now define up to 40 different instance types, which
should be enough for everyone, surely.
Oh, that look a lot, but when you look at, spot instances are per AZ. So if you have 10 type of instances by 3 AZs, then suddenly you are 30 very quickly. So I think it makes sense really for people to use spot.
That's a good point.
An interesting announcement as well is multi-attach support for IO2 instances. So when IO2 was announced, it had every single feature from IO1, but was faster and cheaper and all the good things, except for multi-attach. So multi-attach is where you can use the same instance, the same EBS volume across multiple instances. And that is now also supported in IO2, which basically takes away any excuse not to update your existing IO1.
Yeah. So you can attach up to 16 Nitro-based EC2 instance in the same AZ, right? So this is very important, yeah, because EBS is still per AZ. At the moment, it's US East 2 and US Central and APCS 1. That's about it, yes. And much faster. Use it.
Yep. So does any of you want to go deeply into Lightsail support for IPv6?
That's a nano candidate, isn't it?
Well, it's.
I know you love Lightsail, JM.
No, I don't. But for people who
you feel obliged to defend it anyway.
No, I'm defending IPv6 there because Lightsail was only IPv4. You usually run website, WordPress and stuff like that on Lightsail, and suddenly some customer couldn't access you because they use only IPv6. So now Lightsail open as a dual stack mode and cover IPv4, IPv6. So that makes sure that all this website can be accessible by people with IPv6 IP. So it's a kind of a fix, I would say. But it's still a nano for me. Yeah, I agree.
Some announcements on the Dev and Ops side then. So as developers, new SDK versions are always fun. So personally, I'm happy that the Go SDK version 2 is now generally available. I played around with it 2 years ago when it first came out in beta and saw some really nice improvements in how to write the code. It wasn't as good performance-wise at the time, so in the 2 years since that has happened, I have no doubt that has improved and it has some new features and I'm looking forward to trying it out more.
So according to the announcement, I'm not a Go developer, so I don't know, but there is enhanced error handling, improvement in pagination, and better CPU and memory utilization as well. So probably, a faster Lambda function running on Go now.
Yep.
And the JavaScript SDK has adopted that modular architecture that I think we probably talked about sometime recently with separate packages for each service instead of sort of a monolith. Which might make life easier, hopefully.
So a couple of features as well. Similarly, async generator, bidirectional streaming over WebSocket, and support for HTTP/2 protocol.
Now, in the dev section, in order to ensure we don't get feedback about skipping it, the most important announcement was probably then the general availability of Corretto 11. For Linux on ARM32 and for Windows on x86 32 bits. So if you've got something running on that, I have absolutely no idea when you could last buy hardware that actually was 32-bit. But if you do, you can run Corretto 11 on it now. Congratulations. And might I suggest upgrading your hardware?
Yes, which is not supported anymore on Windows for a long, long time now. Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you reckon's where's the demand for that? Do you think is it old? Is it like industrial systems or something? But then why would they be using Corretto? I don't know.
I feel like it's probably a bank that asked for it.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's always banks that run old hardware.
Maybe an old ATM run Windows 8, 66 on 32-bit and need Java to operate. And because the licensing is going away with Oracle, so maybe that's the only way for them to keep the hardware going. You're right.
Yeah, maybe MyKey, the MyKey system uses Corretto.
Oh, really?
That's probably 32-bit hardware. Isn't it?
Some improvement in the porting assistant for .NET. It supports automated code translation now. So not only, I remind everyone that it's an open source product to analyze your .NET framework and then make sure that you can upgrade to .NET Core and the .NET 5 family to be able to migrate from all Windows stuff to Linux, by the way. So now the porting assistant can automate code translation. So it's going to identify incompatibilities, but when it knows how to fix them, then it's going to be able to inject in your code the commonly found incompatibility in .NET Core. So that's pretty cool. Make the migration to .NET Core even faster for .NET people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good announcement. Solid.
Yep, definitely good. And on the, so call it upside, we've got more managers in Systems Manager. Change Manager, a Fleet Manager, and an Application Manager.
Yep, 3 more products, yes. So AWS venturing into the ITIL system with Change Manager to be able to keep track of what's happening on your machines and then who can do the change and have type of workflow where people are approving your run command or some other type of patching you're going to do. So that's pretty integrated with AWS organization and single sign-on. So that's interesting how they really see that as a full organization product, and it works across AWS region and across multiple accounts. So that's cool. The process, so every change request will cost you around 30 cents US per account. So when you want to do some approval process, so a bit of cost there, but they're venturing in the space of ServiceNow and all this other product. So interesting that if you don't want to go to full-blown service, you can still use proper change management inside the AWS space across your org.
Yeah, considering how much money is usually wasted on people sitting in meetings and stuff like that about those changes, those 30 cents are not exactly the main expense there.
Yeah. And who did the change? And go to the war room. And yes, I remember all of them. So the other manager is application management, and they consolidated the product, by the way. And so you can have auto discovery of your application available in CloudFormation, EKS, or the AWS Launch Wizard, and then that's going to populate your system manager application. So yeah, I never use it. I don't know if that's good or bad.
So this one, so it's. What's it detecting? So just in your AWS account, it's finding your applications for you.
Yes.
Is it like application discovery that you'd run on a migration instance, or in a migration you do application discovery? Is it essentially that?
But system manager can do that already, right? It can monitor your processes and the software installs, stuff like that. But this one is more about the application, I think, and managing the application as a group. I haven't tested it. I can't really.
So it says here, auto discovery is available for applications running in CloudFormation stacks and EKS clusters.
Yeah.
Or launched using a launch wizard. So I guess it's not sniffing your account; it's actually going to those services and looking for evidence that you've got things running. Interesting.
Then your CloudWatch logs and your CloudWatch alarm get consolidated into one place where you can have like a more an operation kind of dashboard instead of having you to go and dig into your EC2 instance logs and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, yeah. If it can do that kind of smarts for you and just make managing your applications a bit more a bit more streamlined, I guess. That's probably and is this a what's the pricing for this, do you know?
No, I don't have information on that.
I think it was free.
I like that price tag.
Yeah, AWS Systems Manager Application Manager is available today at no extra charge in all AWS commercial regions, GovCloud, and the China region.
So I guess because it's consolidating things like CloudWatch logs into an application view. I guess that's why it's looking at things like CloudFormation stacks. It's got to find it needs some help in knowing what resources are related to this application.
Let's have a look at security then. AWS single sign-on. According to the blog post, it now supports Microsoft AD synchronization. Basically, the only real change here is that it now also synchronizes groups, which means you can see the groups in your AWS single sign-on console, admin console, obviously. And that changes to its keep up to date. This is only the case for groups that you have already assigned to something within SSO, whether it's an application or a permission set. So it isn't for all groups on your Microsoft AD, which is probably good from a security standpoint or privacy standpoint. It is less good for solving problem I've personally got where you can't use CloudFormation with groups that have not yet been synced. But it's a step forward, and hopefully we'll see more improvements on that in the near future.
And look, life wasn't meant to be easy, Arjen, so, you know.
No, it is. It is supposed to be easy.
The other big announcement in security, yes, is Amazon Route 53 supporting DNSSEC. So domain name system security extension for Route 53. So you can enable DNS SS or DNSSEC validation on your Route 53 resolvers in your VPCs, and to ensure that there is no tampering with the DNS record you're going to provide to your customer when in transit. So automatically there is some cryptography is happening with KMS there to be able to sign each record of your hosted zone, and the customer can verify that key and verify that the record is correct. It's mainly targeted to customer for FedRAMP and some other, highly regulated health stuff in the US. Might come to Australia very quickly, but at the moment, if you don't need it, don't enable it. It's quite painful to put in place. Make sure your ISP is supporting that as well, or use Route 53 for your domain registrar. So it's a good addition. Some people were complaining about it, that Route 53 was not supporting it. So I think AWS has solved that now.
There's some new guard duty threat detections for S3 that's probably maybe useful.
Yes, that was added. So S3 was added to guard duty, I think last year, mid last year, and then you need to enable it if you have already guard duty. But these three help you detect if the IP caller to the bucket is a malicious IP, or if they're trying to exfiltrate data from your S3, or if there is an impact on the and what will be the impact on your S3 bucket. So I think it's good. A lot of hackers going to try to exfiltrate your data from S3 from anonymous proxy or from the Tor network or from anonymous node or something. So that might help you to give you some alarm bells and hey, something's going wrong on your account, and have a look at your S3 buckets. So Amazon Detective enhance IP address analytics. So now Detective can, give more information about the source IP, what has been hitting your EC2 instance, or how long that IP has been interacting with my resource, how much data went through that IP, which of my EC2 instance can talk to that IP. So again, it's more for, forensic analysis later, but I think that's a good addition to be able to do better data mining on the information Amazon Detective provide.
Data storage and processing. Actually, one that I found, an announcement here that I found interesting is for a product that I think many people always forget AWS actually has, which is Amazon Cloud Search. It has updated the instances, so new instance types there. It's not mentioned what kind of instances or anything like that because, as I said, the service probably isn't used all that much. But my suspicion is that this basically followed the trend from all the other managed services where it's suddenly using Graviton instances because that saves Amazon some money.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense. Yeah, and I guess they would be looking to roll that through all of the existing managed services.
Yeah. AWS Transfer Family now support EFS. So before Transfer Family had support on the S3s. So I'll remind everyone is FTP, SFTP transfer system. It's a node to respond to your upload request and can load to S3. Now you can load to EFS. Why we will do that, I'm not sure. EFS can be mounted from on-prem with the NFS4. So maybe only for people from outside storing stuff on EFS, but why? Yeah, it's more expensive than S3 anyway. So I'm not sure the purpose, but there is no additional cost to use that except the EFS cost is for storage backend, obviously.
Mm.
Yeah, and Aurora now supports Postgres 12, which is nice if you're a Postgres user and want to switch to the later. I believe 12 is the latest. I'm actually not sure.
But you can perform for Aurora MySQL 5.6 to 5.7 in place upgrade, so you don't have to do a snapshot and then do a restoring. You can do an upgrade from the version, so they make life easier if you use Amazon Aurora to move between versions.
So usually we would now have our AI and ML section. The only announcement there were some new instance types for SageMaker, which is the ML.p4d instances. So instead, because we did have a lot of IoT announcements and Guy complained because they were announced, I think, a day or two after we recorded our last podcast, that he didn't get those. He didn't get to talk about them at that point. So, Guy, IoT.
And ever since I've ignored all the announcements because I took an AWS detox in December. So yeah, so most of these I've just looked at today. The LoRaWAN support was one that sort of stuck out for me. So LoRaWAN is a long range WAN technology so it's low power and across very large distances. So it's used in a lot of IoT applications where you've got farms that have devices on cows that might be kilometers away and so forth. So this has got some support for LoRaWAN in AWS IoT Core now. So you can put your LoRaWAN gateway. You can connect that into IoT Core. There's a new version of Greengrass 2.0, so that's a software for devices. So that's a new version of that. Sitewise Edge, I actually don't know what that is. I'm guessing it's an
on-prem version of Sitewise.
Right, nice. Okay. So, but hang on, Sitewise already was on-prem, so now I'm confused. So Sitewise is the sort of collector software that you can put in your factory and it'll aggregate data from lots of different gateways and so forth. So Sitewise Edge, okay.
I assume that is for the collection and organizing of the data will happen on-premise now.
So yeah, instead of uploading everything, you can install that on local hardware and local gateways to be able to upload data to AWS manipulated instead of uploading the data raw.
Yeah, the use case that seems to be mentioned here is that you can keep the sensitive data on-prem.
And do data masking and stuff like that maybe, yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. We're all learning something tonight. site-wise plugin for Grafana. So obviously AWS loves Grafana now, so they're doing stuff like that. What else have we got? Delivering data to Apache Kafka clusters. They also love their managed service for Kafka. So there's adding support for that.
The IoT Educate seems interesting.
Oh, yes. That's kind of cute. So that's like a... it's a little box with... It's a little bit like a Raspberry Pi, except it's got a screen and it's in a case, but it's got all the usual sort of inputs and outputs, Ethernet and card slot and so forth. It's about $40 US. They're made by a company called M5 Stack. So they're basically an AWS branded version of something that M5 Stack produce anyway. It's got an ESP32 processor inside, and there's a little 2-inch screen on the front. So quite a nice little device if you're, I guess, developing an IoT product, or if you just want to learn how to do it. It's got Ethernet port. It's got what's it got? Ethernet, USB, power. I don't know. I think it's got a battery in it, which is it's got a lithium battery in it. Some
expansion modules, so you can expand on it and stuff like that. But basically, does this mean that if they'd called this Deep IoT, they would have had something after all?
Deep IoT. Yeah, maybe. Except it's got no machine learning in it at the moment, so they'd have to put some machine learning in it somehow.
So maybe that's just going to be V2 next year.
Yeah. Maybe they need to put an inferentia chip in it,
or they will put Device Defender ML Detect on it.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is the next announcement there.
Yes. So again, so obviously AWS are quite busy in this space at the moment, and one of the announcements at reInvent was the Monotron, which I think did we talk about that in December, or did it come after that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So again, they're looking, I guess, investing in this space, and in particular looking at industrial monitoring, and obviously machine learning is a key technology in that space to do anomaly detection, which is what the Monotron system sort of gives you out of the box. And in this case, Device Defender is using ML to detect security events, things that are going on with your IoT device that aren't expected.
Shall we have a look at the other cool stuff?
I think that's a good idea.
Yes.
So, honestly, I don't know if it's cool stuff, but the whole kerfuffle with Elasticsearch. So, for those who missed what happened here, is Elastic was unhappy, or the investors were unhappy maybe. I don't really know. And they decided, we'll follow the example of MongoDB and actually change to that same license that Mongo uses, which is a license that seems to be aimed at basically avoiding usage by cloud provider in managed products.
Yeah. So as I understood it, the new license basically requires anyone who runs the software that any management plane or a tooling that they put in place around the software also has to be released as open source.
Correct.
Yeah, or as under the same license, presumably. Yeah, so that would kind of basically mean it's sort of designed, I guess, if I was being cynical, it's designed to screw people like AWS, who obviously are going to build management planes around things like Elasticsearch. And make it unviable for them to do it.
That is not being cynical. That is literally what the license is aimed at.
Yeah.
And I read a blog, and someone was, I think it's true that on Azure it's called Elastic on Azure, and on Google it's called Elastic on GCP, where they pay the fees to Elastic, where AWS had Elasticsearch, which was a product a long time ago. And they don't have the same arrangement, so Elastic had to put some pressure on them, and I think probably AWS said no, and so now Elasticsearch is going to be forked and maintained by AWS.
Because that was the completely unexpected results that AWS picked up the fork they already made, because I think it was last year or the year before, where Elastic already started moving some parts of the code into non-open source versions. And AWS at that time decided, okay, we'll offer fully open source versions of those same functionalities. And now they're basically picking up that, at the time, not really yet a fork, but now turning it into an actual fork. Because one of the side effects as well of the new license is that it makes a lot of companies that use it, so not just cloud providers, but actual companies, organizations, they become wary of it. They don't want to use it as much because, hey, there might be, if they use it in the wrong way, they might need to open source their own stuff as well. And that does not make them happy.
Yeah.
So AWS announced on Twitter the next day that they will fork the product and they will release it through the Apache 2.0 license. So they did that. So the Elasticsearch and Kibana now is based on that license, and the version 7.10 is going to be published on GitHub for people to be able to use. Yeah, Big Muscle Elastic didn't work against AWS, I guess.
No, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Google and Azure also think, well, we can pay that license, or we can just
use the open source from AWS. Are you sure they're going to do that? Yeah. Depending on how the product will evolve, right? I think a long time ago is Oracle who bought MySQL and make a mess of it, and people had to fork it. So yeah. We see, time will tell where that product evolved, and yeah. But Elastic is not a tiny, small open source company who don't have any money, right? It's a multi-billion dollars company who make a lot of revenue on Elastic, so they wanted maybe a bit more.
Yeah, interesting to see how it plays out.
But for now, let's look at more interesting or more fun things.
Mm-hmm.
AWS Cloud Shell. This
is probably the other most talked about announcement, I reckon, but certainly the circles are moving anyway. Since Cloud Shell was one of those things that everyone went, Cloud Shell. We finally got a Cloud Shell. I think JM, you've got all the deets on this, haven't you?
I had a look at it, logged into it, play a bit with it, try to install stuff, broke it, and then. Yeah, I did a couple of sudo commands and then suddenly nothing was working again. So I had to revert back, but you can revert back by just deleting your user folder. So, and then log in again and you're back on. So, AWS CLI 2.058, Python 3.7, and a couple of other type of plugin automatically through your console, through your Chrome or different browser. You get logged in automatically. So you don't have to inject a permanent keys, a secret key and a token. You get your identity straight from the AWS console, so you can get caller identity and see who you are and stuff like that. So yeah, very, very easy to use. You have 1 gig of memory storage, free per AWS region. So the sad part is not yet in Sydney, so you need to log into the US or other regions, but I'm sure you're going to come very quickly. It's based on the shell environment based on Amazon Linux 2. So you can do batch command, like I said, you can do sudo, install stuff, and after a while you get disconnected and then you can relog into your console and keep going. So it's a cool product. I mean, other cloud provider was offering something similar. Most of the product get disabled by financial organization because they don't like it, so it's better to go back to a system manager or something which is a bit more kind of regulated. But it's cool. It's going to help us to do trainings and stuff like that for engineer, and maybe make an engineer faster operational instead of him to have installed all the stuff on his machine and sometime lock machine who can't install anything. Then you can very quickly run Python script and stuff like that. There is a new IAM, the role or policy that you need to have is AWS Cloud Shell Full Access Policy. You need to be able to do that. Otherwise, if you get denied, that won't work. That's what I had on it.
Cool. That's a pretty good summary. Amazon Location. Amazon Location was another interesting play, I thought. So if you look at this as also it's kind of got a tie-in with IoT stuff, I think, because I think a lot of use cases for IoT involve, tracking things. And there was not really anything in AWS for solving that. So with Amazon Location, you've basically got the ability to create maps, create geo-fencing, and it's a sort of a location awareness product, I guess. And in terms of, I guess, if you're someone who's been developing apps and map-based apps, it'll be an option for you to use Amazon's tiles to build your apps. And I'm guessing something like this is going to end up in things like Amplify if it's not there already to make that easier for you. As you can use a couple of different map libraries to build your map. It supports Mapbox GL and Tangram. I haven't used Tangram. Mapbox GL's been around for a while. So it's a kind of an interesting new kind of product for AWS. But I think it sort of ties in with a bunch of other sort of strategically important things, IoT being one of them, and just sort of general, I guess, knowing more about the user, and being able to kind of work with users in space. It's kind of going to give you tools around that.
Okay. Is available in US East, Virginia and Ohio, US West, Oregon, Ireland, and Tokyo at the moment.
And still in preview.
Yeah, still in preview. And AWS says, is priced at a fraction of a common alternative. So, without naming who it is.
Google Maps.
And then the first 3 months are free. So that's interesting. That they would encourage people to use that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's using Esri's maps. I'm not a huge fan of Esri, but most of the data itself is part of the OpenStreetMap project now. It's come from the OpenStreetMap project. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically community generated map data. So it's all been built by people basically, riding around places and collecting GPS coordinates and building the maps. So it's an open source data set, which is probably what's making it possible. They don't seem to have any, I haven't seen anyway, they don't seem to have any other imagery other than street maps. So there's no satellite imagery or aerial or 3D or anything like that fancy that you'd get from Google.
Yeah.
So it's very basic. It's just flat street maps. But, if that's all you need, and a lot of use cases do only need that, yeah, it's got some it's an interesting product because places like Mapbox that have got, map tiles and different imagery and sort of some tools around doing geospatial type calculations, they're kind of obviously tying it in with this idea of having a tracker and having geofencing. Those are the sort of two sort of key capabilities that they're kind of leading with, which are a differentiator. So yeah, it's an interesting space for them to be getting into.
Cool.
Cost anomaly detection, yeah, that I turned that on in my account this afternoon I think something like that would be perfect for me because I do stupid things. I go and turn something on and then forget about it, and then come back a week later and go, oh, what's happened to my bill? Yeah, so those sorts of, but it should generally be steady state, right? So if my account is usually steady state and then something strange happens, that's really what I want to know about. So that's what this seems to do. Have you had a look at it, JM?
I enabled in my account as well. It's a free service that monitor your spending and detect anomalies in spending. If suddenly someone start mining Bitcoin on your account, you will be alerted. So there is no cost, but if you have SNS attached to it, then there will be a cost for the SNS to send you, which is usually free tier anyway. But so yeah, it's now GA. We talked about it a bit before when it was in preview, and you can enable it. Yeah,
and you probably should. Go and do it now.
It's like gratuity is something you need to have. While we are in cost, there is an announcement this month as well about being able to use a usage report in the available member or linked account. in the past, all the costing report, the CSV file coming from the billing system to S3 were only in the master account. So now you can have as well into the child account that reports detail in CSV files that you can do more analysis on it. So it's not limited to the master account anymore. The master account will still receive all the information of all the accounts, but now the member account can have the cost and usage report as well.
Yeah, which is good because then people with access to that member account can actually see the reports as well for what they use without needing access to the master account.
Yeah, that's ideal, right? You want to empower your member user to be able to use their own account and their own costing and monitor the costing without having to give them access to the master account. Definitely a good security improvement as well there.
Well, we're on the pricing one. SQS now has tiered pricing. I don't suspect most people will actually even notice this because the tiering is the first 1 million requests per month is free, and then the next tier is from 1 million to 100 billion requests per month.
So I wonder which customer asked for this and got it.
But if you look at the announcement just before that, there was a high throughput mode in FIFO, right? Where we're talking about 3,000 messages per second now for the FIFO queue. So, if we come back to a financial organization or a trading application who used to use Kafka or the product like that, now can maybe use SQS instead, and then that makes certainly sense when you have a lot of transactions per second.
Yep.
So the high throughput FIFO for FIFO queue is in preview, and it's only in the US, Virginia, Ohio, Oregon, and Ireland at the moment. A couple of announcements in Control Tower, which is interesting. More region. I think 10 more region has been announced today, and you can extend your governance as well to an OU existing new org. So Control Tower can kind of take his different security product on OUs and other accounts who exist. And then I want to see that product to work, but they have an import system to import an account into Control Tower, which was a set of Python script who was working account per account. Well, people said it's impossible. It takes like 45 minutes, an hour per account. It's not viable. Now Control Tower just released a product for bulk account update. So you can import up to 300 accounts in one go into your Control Tower. Will be very interesting to see what type of organization use 300 account with Control Tower. I would say they probably have their own landing zone, but why not? And let's see how that import will work and how many failure you will need to remediate after that.
Yeah, I wonder if the button has a big, it's big and red and shiny, and it's got a danger written underneath it or something.
Yeah. So, but like we said before, Control Tower is not the best product. He has been pushed by AWS a lot. It's getting better and better. It's still a long way to go. But there is still a lot of improvement happening all the time. And it's still a click and go product through the console, right? There is no API. There is no CLI. So I won't use it yet. Then where are the nanos?
I added one for myself.
I had the Core 807 on ARM32 and Windows 32-bit. It doesn't help us, doesn't touch us. Maybe, as you said, some remote financial company in the US having ATM running on 32-bit.
Mm-hmm. And I think I would have to stick with the Lightsail IPv6 one, even though I know there are use cases for it. It's just it doesn't excite me.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, the one I picked was Aurora supports in-place upgrades from Postgres 11 to 12. Not because it's not useful, but because it was announced in a separate announcement at the same time as, hey, Aurora now supports Postgres 12.
Yes.
There's literally no point in making that a separate announcement other than beefing up the number of announcements.
Yeah. They have a quota.
Yeah, good point. I had another one, which is the tagging of Elastic IP address at creation time.
Ah, yes.
I know it's useful, but why was not there day one, right? Why we couldn't tag Elastic IP address. I don't know. And we still can't tag, by the way, AWS, if you listen, we can still tag the EBS root volumes with CloudFormation. I don't understand why. Please fix it.
And with that, we have reached the end of today's episode. So obviously, I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to thank our sponsors. This year, we still have the same sponsors. There's our gold sponsor, Enabler, and our silver sponsors, AC3, CMD Solutions, and Do It International. So thank you to all of those for sticking with us into 2021. And of course, talking about sticking with us, thank you as well, JM. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always a pleasure to discuss with you guys the news.
And Guy, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me, and it's always a learning experience, which I love.
Cool. And then goodbye, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you next time.